There are places the living should never walk, places where silence is heavier than stone, and the wind carries voices that do not belong to the present world. The old ones tell us there is a boundary, not a wall of stone, not a gate of iron, but a veil that bleeds. They say when the moon swells and drips its red light across the forest, you may see it there between the trees, a shimmer, a trembling curtain of crimson mist, hanging as though the night itself has torn open, the crimson veil. It is not fabric, not smoke, not air. It is alive, and it whispers. No one agrees on what it truly is. Some say it is a wound in the earth, torn open during mankind's first sin. Some whisper that it is a gate woven from the blood of the forgotten. Others believe it is a punishment for all who dare to wander too far from the safety of firelight. But one thing is always the same. The veil does not move like fog. It does not drift with the wind. It clings to one place, pulsing faintly, as though it has a heart that beats slow and patient, waiting for another soul to come close. The villagers they remember, their elders told them, and those elders heard it from theirs. Generation after generation, warning after warning. Do not follow the crimson light. Do not touch the mist. Do not listen when it calls your name. But people forget. Fear fades into superstition, and superstition becomes story. And stories are always doubted. Still, even in doubt, some things cannot be ignored. The missing, the hunters who never returned, the children who wandered too far into the woods, only for their voices to echo back days later, thin, broken, and wrong. And so the villagers whisper the veil. They do not speak of it under the sun, for they say its whispers can travel along the sound of its name. Only at night, when the fires burn high and the wind carries the smell of smoke, do they dare to remind the young. There are places you cannot go. There are doors you cannot open. There are whispers you must never answer. And yet, the whispering never stops, because the veil has patience. It does not need you to believe in it. It only needs you to hear it once. They say the moment you hear the whisper, it never leaves you. It follows you into your dreams. It lingers behind your thoughts. It waits until one day, without even knowing why, your feet begin to move toward the trees. And when you arrive, the moon is red, the air is heavy, and the veil waits, always waiting, always whispering. Come closer, step through, join us. The crimson veil has claimed countless before you. It will claim countless more. And tonight, it begins again. There is always one who refuses to believe, one who thinks himself braver, wiser, stronger than all who came before. And in this story, it was a traveler. No one remembers his name. Perhaps the veil erased it, as it erases all things. Perhaps he never deserved a name at all. But they remember his eyes, sharp, curious, burning with hunger. Not hunger for bread, nor coin, nor comfort, but hunger for truth. For he was a scholar, a man who hunted knowledge like a predator hunts prey. He had walked the ruins of drowned cities. He had pressed his hands against the stones of temples where no gods listen anymore. He had taken the words of dying empires and carried them in books, bound tight, so no one could forget. He believed in many things. He believed in stories. He believed in reason. He believed in discovery. But he did not believe in fear. When he first heard the whispers of the crimson veil, he did not shiver. He did not lower his gaze. He smiled. A story, another superstition, another jewel for his collection. The villagers had been careful not to speak of it in daylight, but rumors drift, even through trembling lips. He heard it first in fragments, a child's warning, a drunkard's mutter, an elder's half-finished prayer, and he gathered them each word a piece of a puzzle he was desperate to complete. He began asking questions, pressing, demanding. What is the veil? Where does it appear? What lies beyond it? The villagers grew pale. Some turned away. Some spat at his feet and cursed him. Others begged him never to speak of it again. But he was relentless, because for every refusal, for every trembling silence, his curiosity only grew sharper. And so they began to answer, not with comfort, not with clarity, but with warnings. The veil is not for men to see. It is the hunger that swallows the disobedient. Step too close, and you will not return. But he laughed. He mocked them. He said they were chained by shadows, enslaved by their own trembling. Yet the villagers did not laugh with him. The old woman who sold him bread would no longer meet his eyes. The children who once lingered at his side now ran from his shadow. And one elder, stooped and hollow, took his hand in the dark and whispered, "You will hear it, and when you do, it will already be too late." But the traveler had heard warnings before. He had seen men flee from caves they swore were cursed, only to discover nothing within but stone. He had seen priests tremble before broken idols. Idols he shattered without consequence. He had stood where others swore demons walked, and found only silence. Every warning he had ever ignored had proven him right. Fear, he believed, was a lie, and so he sought it. Night after night, he lingered at the forest's edge. The villagers barred their doors. The dogs refused to follow him. Even the owls grew silent when he walked beneath the trees. Still he wrote. He sketched their descriptions of the veil, a curtain of crimson mist that appeared only when the moon bled its red light. He filled page after page, scraps of belief pressed into ink and paper. But still it was not enough. Ink was not proof. Words were not truth. He needed to see it, and in his hunger, he began to dream. Dreams of red mist curling through the forest, dreams of voices whispering his name in a tongue he did not know, dreams of a curtain, trembling, breathing, waiting. He woke each time drenched in sweat, but he did not fear. No, he smiled, because the dreams were a sign, proof that he was close. And so he waited for the blood moon. The villagers prayed. They barred their windows, shut their doors, and filled their homes with firelight. But he went into the woods, alone. The air that night was heavy. The forest did not move. Not even the leaves dared whisper. And as the moon bled its light across the treetops, he saw it. At first, only a shimmer, faint, like the dying breath of a candle flame. But as he stepped closer, the shimmer thickened. The trees bent away. The earth grew damp beneath his feet, as though he walked upon veins. And there it was, a curtain of crimson mist, hanging motionless between the trees, not drifting with the wind, not fading, not alive, and yet not dead. It pulsed, slowly, steadily, like breath, and for the first time the traveler hesitated. Not because he believed the stories, not because he felt fear, but because in that moment, in the silence of the bleeding moon, he realized something. The villagers had not exaggerated. If anything, they had not told enough, for the veil was no superstition. It was real, and it was waiting. The traveler stood at the edge of the forest clearing, and before him, the world had torn itself open, the crimson veil. It was not smoke. It was not fog. It was something heavier, denser, like liquid suspended in the air. It hung motionless between the trees, yet it pulsed. Every few moments it quivered, as though it were breathing, as though it were waiting. The mist shimmered in the light of the bleeding moon, deep red, threaded with darker veins that twisted and curled like strands of muscle. When the wind moved through the forest, the trees bent, the leaves rustled, but the veil did not shift. It defied the world around it. A curtain not of this earth. The traveler stared, his heart hammering. He had chased stories before. He had seen wonders and ruins. But nothing had ever looked back at him, for he felt it. The veil was not a thing to be observed. It was a thing that observed him. A pressure, a gaze without eyes, pressing against the marrow of his bones. He swallowed, his mouth dry, yet he forced himself forward. He whispered to himself, "It is fog, it is light, it is nothing more than superstition." But as he drew nearer, the air thickened. The ground softened beneath his boots. Like flesh, the trees leaned away from him, as though recoiling in fear. And then he heard it, the whispers, at first faint, like distant voices drifting through hollow chambers. But with every step, they grew sharper. Countless voices, layered one upon another, all speaking in tongues he could not understand. And yet his mind understood. Closer. Step through. Join us. The words slithered into his skull, echoing inside his teeth, inside his chest. It was not sound. It was something deeper. For a moment, his body froze. Every instinct screamed to turn away. Every drop of blood in his veins howled to flee. But the traveler was no man of instinct. He was a man of reason, and reason told him this was his chance, his proof, his discovery. So, trembling, he raised his hand. The mist reached for him, not outward, not forward, but inward, as if it had been waiting for his touch all along. It was cold, colder than ice, colder than the grave. It burned as it clung to his skin, sliding between his fingers, curling around his wrist. It did not move like air. It moved like something alive, something hungry. The whispers grew louder. They no longer beckoned. They demanded, "Step through, step through, step through." And with a single breath, a single step, he obeyed. The world shifted. The veil swallowed him whole. The cold surged through his chest, ripping breath from his lungs. The whispers exploded into a chorus, every voice screaming at once. His vision blurred. His ears rang. And when his senses returned, he was no longer in the forest. No birds, no trees, no wind, only silence. A silence so heavy it pressed against his skin, squeezing the life from him. The air was crimson, thick, heavy, suffocating. The sky was not sky at all. A low, endless ceiling of pulsing red, and the ground beneath his feet was not earth. It was soft, yielding, like walking upon flesh. The traveler staggered, his breath shallow, his hands trembling. He turned. Behind him, the veil stood like a wall of living blood, but it no longer pulsed outward. It no longer beckoned. It was closed. The forest was gone. The world he had left was gone, and in that moment, he realized the villagers had never lied. They had not exaggerated. They had not woven fear from nothing. If anything, they had told him too little. For beyond the crimson veil, there was no world, only a hollow reflection, and it was waiting for him. The air was wrong. It was not air at all. It did not fill his lungs. It clung to them. Every breath was thick metallic, tasting of rust and blood. The traveler staggered forward, his boots sinking into ground. Not soil, not stone, but something softer, something that gave way beneath his weight, like bruised flesh beneath a knife. The sky above was no sky at all. A ceiling of crimson haze stretched endlessly, rippling with faint pulses, as though it were alive. There was no sun, no stars, only the glow of a blood-red firmament pressing low, watching, and the silence. Oh, the silence! It was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of abandonment, of a place where sound itself had been murdered. The traveler called out, if only to hear something. His own voice echoed back to him, thin, hollow, distorted, as though someone else had spoken with his throat. He pressed onward. Before him stretched a village, or rather, the echo of one. Huts leaned against one another, their walls sagging, their roofs caving inward. Doors hung open, but no wind stirred them. The village looked familiar, too familiar, for he recognized it. It was the same village he had left behind, the same shapes of huts, the same crooked well at its center. But it was wrong. Where there should have been faces at the windows, there were shadows. Where there should have been children at play, there were still forms standing in silence, figures of people, but eyeless, their sockets smooth, their faces blank, their heads twitching ever so slightly, as if listening to something only they could hear. The traveler's heart hammered. He whispered to himself, they are illusions, mirages, fragments of a dream. But then one of the figures turned, not with the slowness of life, but with the suddenness of a predator, its hollow face tilted toward him, though it had no eyes to see. And still he felt its gaze. He stumbled back, his boot sinking deeper into the fleshy ground. And in that instant, the whispers returned, not faint, not distant, but here, everywhere. They slithered through the air, through the walls, through his skin. We see you. We know you. You cross, you belong. The traveler clutched his ears. The sound was inside his skull, burrowing into bone. The eyeless figures began to move, not walking, not stepping, but gliding. Their limbs hung loose, their heads twitching, their mouths open in soundless moans. He turned from them, running deeper into the hollow village. But with every street he took, every corner he turned, he found the same huts, the same shadows, the same faceless people waiting. The village was a loop, a trap, an endless reflection of itself. And as he stumbled into the center once more, he saw the well, the same crooked well, but deeper now, endless, a pit that swallowed light. From its depths he heard them, not whispers this time, but screams, layered voices, countless voices, screaming in agony, yet still calling his name. The traveler's knees buckled, his breath came ragged, his body trembling. He had crossed in search of truth, but truth was no comfort here. Truth was horror, and he began to understand. This place was not another world, not heaven, not hell. It was a reflection, a copy of the living world, stripped of life, filled with shadows that stare without eyes and scream without mouths. A hollow world, a mirror of death, and he was not alone in it, for as he turned from the pit, he saw something standing at the edge of the well, a figure cloaked in threads of crimson, motionless, waiting, and though it did not move, he knew it had always been here, that it had always been waiting for him. The keeper, the traveler froze, his body ice, his soul trembling, and the voices whispered again, soft and terrible. You crossed. You belong. The keeper will take you now. The figure stood, unmoving, wrapped in a shroud of crimson threads, woven tight as if stitched into its very flesh. The traveler did not breathe, could not breathe, for every breath seemed to feed the thing before him. It had no face. Where skin should have been, there were only layers of cloth, dyed deep in red, Yet beneath that veil, something shifted, something pulsed, like veins beating beneath fabric. It tilted its head slowly, an unnatural angle, too far, like a marionette whose strings had been pulled by unseen hands. And though it had no eyes, he felt it watching him, not with sight, but with knowledge. The air grew tighter, as though the village itself held its breath. Even the faceless figures had stilled. Their twitching ceased, their bodies locked, all waiting, all watching. The traveler's knees weakened. He whispered to himself, "It is not real, it is not real." But the veil rippled, and a voice rose, not from the figure, not from the pit, but from within his own chest. "We are real enough." The traveler staggered. The sound of the words was wrong. They were not spoken. They were sewn into him, stitched into his flesh, as though the crimson threads had found their way inside his veins. The keeper raised one arm. It moved with no sound, yet the air screamed as it shifted. In its hand, it held no weapon, yet the traveler felt cut open, stripped bare. He saw his memories unraveling, his mother's voice, his father's face, the first steps he ever took, the warmth of sunlight on his skin. All of it came apart, thread by thread, pulled from him, hovering in the air like strands of silk. He gasped, clutching his chest, but his hands passed through the glowing threads, as if they were smoke. The keeper twisted its hand. The threads tightened. Memories cracked, faces blurred, and the traveler screamed, "Stop!" For a moment, the threads froze. The figure tilted its head again, studying him. Then it spoke, not with words, but with silence, a silence that entered his bones, that told him everything without sound. "You crossed the veil, and every crossing must be paid. The flesh carries memories. The soul carries stories. We are the collectors. We are the keepers." The traveler fell to his knees, clutching the earth, soft, pulsing, alive. His tears burned his cheeks, for even sorrow felt stolen. "Why me?" he whispered, his voice breaking. "Why must it be me?" And the keeper leaned forward. "Because you opened the wound, because you tore the cloth, because you wished to know, and knowing is death." The faceless figures stirred again, their heads twitching in unison, their mouths open wide, and though no sound came, the traveler felt their scream in his marrow. The keeper stretched out its other hand, and this time he saw what it held, a needle, longer than a blade, forged from something that gleamed like bone and blood. Its tip dripped with threads that writhed like worms. The traveler recoiled, but his body would not move. His limbs were no longer his own. The keeper leaned closer, pressing the needle toward his chest. "You will be sewn into the hollow. You will join the reflection. You will walk eyeless, until all who knew you forget your name." The needle pierced the skin. Cold fire surged through him. He screamed, but no sound left his lips, for his scream had been stolen too. The faceless figures lurched forward now, gliding in circles around him. Their heads twitched, their bodies bending in ways no human should, and the keeper whispered into his bones, "One thread for one life, one stitch for one soul." The traveler's vision blurred, his body trembled, and for a moment he saw himself reflected in their hollow faces. He saw himself eyeless. He saw himself faceless. He saw himself one of them. But then the pit screamed, not whispers, not voices, but a roar, 1,000 screams rising as one, shaking the hollow village, splitting the crimson haze above. The keeper froze. The faceless one stopped. All turned toward the pit, and from the darkness within the well, something vast moved, something deeper than the keeper, something older than the veil. The traveler collapsed, the threads loosening, the needle withdrawing, and in that moment of trembling breath, he realized the keeper was not the master. The keeper was only the servant. The true horror was yet to rise. The earth trembled. The crimson haze above quivered, its pulsing rhythm faltering for the first time. And from the pit, the crooked well that had swallowed light and sound, a voice rose, not a whisper, not a single scream, but all screams at once. They clawed against one another, writhing and tearing through the air, until the sound became unbearable. A sound so sharp it felt like blades pressed against bone. A sound that was not heard, but lived. The traveler clutched his ears, but it was useless. The sound was already inside. It filled his skull, his veins, his marrow. The faceless figures collapsed to their knees, their eyeless sockets tilted upward, mouths stretched wide in silent reverence. Even the keeper staggered. The crimson threads around its body shivered, tightening and loosening as if something unseen tugged them. The needle in its hand trembled, not with weakness, but with restraint, as though the keeper itself feared what rose from the pit. The traveler crawled backward, his breath ragged, his vision fractured by streaks of black and red. Each scream from the pit felt like a hook in his flesh, pulling him closer. He dared to look, and he wished he had not, for something was climbing from the darkness. Not a form, not a creature, but a mass, a shifting storm of limbs and faces, of mouths stretched open, screaming in unison. The faces changed endlessly. Men, women, children, some he had never known, and some he recognized. His mother, his brother, his childhood friend, all of them screaming, their mouths melting into one another, their eyes dissolving into pits. The mass rose higher, pulling itself up the well's edge, its surface writhed with pale arms, clawing upward, then dissolving into more faces, more mouths, more screams. The traveler's body went rigid. He could not move. He could not breathe. He could only watch as a horror emerged. The keeper lowered its head, and for the first time it bent the knee. The crimson threads bowed with it, stretching taut, as if pulled toward the pit, and in the traveler's bones a truth thundered. This was not a servant. This was not a reflection. This was the master of the veil, the devourer, the thousand. A great voice thundered from the mass, not a sound made of language, but of hunger. We are all. We are the veil. We are the scream that binds. The ground split beneath the traveler. The hollow village trembled. The huts collapsed inward, their walls folding like paper, their shadows scattering. And yet the faceless figures did not flee. They bowed lower, pressing their heads into the pulsing earth, offering themselves, as if they were already claimed. The traveler screamed, or tried to, but the air swallowed his voice. The devourer turned its endless faces toward him, and every mouth, thousands upon thousands, spoke his name. Traveler, the sound of it broke him. How did it know his name? How could every voice, voices that were never meant to exist, call him so intimately? The keeper lifted its needle again, not to strike him, but to mark him. Threads slithered from the tip, wrapping around his wrists, his throat, his chest, binding him to the pit. The devourer's mouth gaped wider, and within them he saw not teeth, but more mouths, endless, layer upon layer. Each screamed for him, each screamed as him, for in their endless cries, he began to hear his own voice. "Help me? I don't want this. Let me out." The traveler convulsed. Falling to the pulsing earth, his body fell hollow, his soul unraveling. The crimson haze above split open, a gash of black tearing across the sky. Through it he saw nothing, only void, a void that stretched forever. And he understood the crimson veil was not a border. It was not a wall. It was a wound, a tear in reality. And the thing that climbed from the pit was infection. The keeper lowered its needle to his chest again. Its threads tightened. The devourer's mouth opened wider. The traveler knew he was about to be claimed, unmade, absorbed into the thousand. But then, from the gash in the crimson sky, something else moved. A second presence. Not light, not salvation, but something older, something that made even the devourer's screaming falter. The traveler's eyes widened, for beyond horror, there was something worse, and it was coming. The sky bled open. The crimson haze, once constant, once pulsing like the flesh of a living wound, was split apart. A jagged gash stretched across the firmament, a wound within a wound, a deeper tear in reality itself. From it spilled not light, but darkness, a blackness thicker than shadow, not absence, but presence, a weight that pressed down, crushing the village beneath its silence. The traveler gasped as the air itself vanished. Not wind, not breath, but sound. Every whisper, every scream, every heartbeat was swallowed whole. Even the devourer faltered, its thousands of mouths stilled. The endless chorus of screams broke into silence, and for the first time, the traveler saw terror ripple across the writhing faces. The faceless villagers did not bow this time. They writhed, they convulsed, their hollow sockets filled with black liquid, which poured down their featureless cheeks like streams of tar. The keeper froze, its crimson thread snapping taut, pulled violently toward the gash in the sky. It fell to its knees, bowing lower than it had even before the devourer. The needle in its hand quivered, as though desperate to break. And then it came. Something vast moved within the black tear. At first, only the edges of it appeared, tendrils of nothingness, curling outward, not smoke, not mist, but strips of emptiness that cut the crimson haze into ribbons. The devourer shrank back from the pit, its massive faces folding inward, its arms retreating. A low moan rippled through its countless throats. Not hunger, not rage, but dread. The traveler's heart pounded, his body trembling. For the devourer, the god of screams, the master of the hollow, could feel fear. Then what was this thing? That crawl from the black tear? The wound in the sky widened, and from it descended a shape. It was not flesh. It was not shadow. It was both, a towering figure of darkness, wrapped in folds of night, its body a silhouette that shifted with each blink. One moment it seemed human, the next, a beast with too many limbs. The next, a vast, winged terror that blotted the pit itself, its head bent downward, yet no face could be seen, no mouth, no eyes, no features at all, and yet the traveler felt its gaze, not on his skin, not in his body, but in his soul. Every secret he had buried, every thought he had hidden was suddenly exposed. The devourer howled, its countless mouths finally breaking their silence. The scream shook the ground, splintered the huts, shattered the very edges of the hollow. But the figure in the tear did not move. It simply watched. And then a voice came, not loud, not thunderous, but soft, quieter than breath. Yet more terrible than all the screams of the pit. The wound widens. The traveler's heart stopped. The words were not for him. They were not for anyone. They were spoken to the veil itself, to the world. The Devourer shrieked again. Its voice is now pleading, its endless mouths chanting one broken word. Not yet, not yet, not yet. The keeper's crimson threads snap one by one, spilling into the void like strands of blood. It pressed its head to the earth, submitting wholly, and the traveler, caught between the pit and the sky, felt his mind begin to tear. His thoughts unraveled, splitting into fragments, memories bleeding into visions. He saw other worlds, reflected through the tear, worlds without sun, worlds drowned in shadow, worlds where cities writhed with eyeless inhabitants, all bound by crimson threads, all consumed by the pit, and beyond them he saw black, an ocean of black that stretched forever, and something moving within it, something greater even than the figure now descending. The traveler screamed, but the black tear swallowed his voice whole. No sound escaped. Not even his own terror belonged to him any more. The shadow reached lower, its tendrils curling into the pit, wrapping around Devourer's writhing mass. The thousands of faces wailed as one, their screams piercing the silence. But it was no use. The shadow pulled, and the Devourer recoiled. It was not the master. It was prey. The traveler collapsed, his body convulsing, his eyes blinded by the darkness spilling across the sky. And he knew, with a certainty deeper than thought, the crimson veil was not the end. The crimson veil was the beginning, and what waited beyond the tear was not hunger. It was nothingness, a nothingness so vast it could devour even a devourer. The sky's wound gaped wider. The black tear bled darkness into the crimson haze, and the world beneath it writhed like an open sore. The faceless villagers convulsed, their bodies bending backward until their spines cracked like dry wood, their hollow sockets poured with black tar, their mouths splitting wider and wider, as if preparing to consume what little air remained. The traveler crawled, desperate to escape, but the ground itself pulsed against his hands. Not soil, not stone, but flesh. It heaved with every tremor, forcing him closer to the pit. The Devourer shrieked, its countless mouths splitting wider, its mass writhing with panic. Never had he seen such a thing tremble. The Lord of Screams, the Eater of Souls, now reduced to terror. Its voices called upward to the tear. Not him, not him. He is ours. The shadow above did not answer. It did not need to. Its silence was heavier than words. The black tear pressed lower, tendrils stretching down like chains of night, curling around the edges of the pit, claiming what was already claimed. The keeper rose, slowly. Its crimson threads quivered, snapping one by one as the black tendrils pulled against them. It staggered forward, toward the traveler. The needle in its hand blazed red, its threads writhing with hunger, and though it had no face, he felt its gaze. Cold, unyielding, the traveler tried to move, but his limbs were bound, not by rope, not by flesh, but by memory. Every step he had ever taken, every path he had walked, wrapped around him like chains. He could not fight them. They were him. The keeper spoke, but not aloud. Its words vibrated inside his bones. The tear calls. The wound hungers. You must be given. The traveler screamed, No, I don't belong here. I never wanted this. But the faceless villagers rose from the ground, their bodies twitching, their arms outstretched. They moved as one, a congregation of hollow worshippers. Their eyeless sockets turned to him. Their hands reached, fingers trembling with reverence. They began to chant, though no sound escaped their mouths. Yet he felt it. Their words burned inside his head. Offer him, offer him, offer him. The keeper seized his arm. Its grip was ice. The threads coiled tighter, sinking beneath his skin, stitching flesh to flesh, binding him to the pit. The Devourer howled in fury. Its mouth thundered. "He is ours!" It surged upward, its storm of faces reaching for him, limbs clawing the ground, desperate to pull him into its mass. But the shadow above extended a single tendril, and the Devourer froze. The writhing mass stilled, its mouths clamped shut, its countless faces trembling in silence. The traveler gasped, his body convulsing, as the threads pulled him closer to the pit. His chest burned, his thoughts unraveled. Every memory of his childhood, of his village, of sunlight and rivers, of laughter and grief, all of it began to bleed away. The keeper raised its needle high. The crimson threads writhed, piercing deeper into him, sewing his essence into the fabric of the hollow. The villagers pressed lower, their hands scraping against the pulsing ground. Their voiceless chant grew louder in his skull. "Offer him! Offer him! Offer him!" The Devourer moaned, a sound like thunder torn apart. It tried to resist, but the shadow's tendril crushed it back into the pit, forcing its mouth to silence. The traveler screamed as the needle drove into his chest. His vision shattered, his soul cracked. He felt himself splitting in two, half of him sewn into the hollow, the other half pulled toward the tear. The shadow loomed lower. Its presence filled the sky, drowning out all light. The wound widened still, as though his offering was the key. And for a heartbeat, just one, the traveler saw what lay beyond the tear. Not emptiness, not shadow, but an ocean of black hands, stretching endlessly, clawing at the wound, clawing to come through. And in that instant, he understood this was not sacrifice, this was invitation. The hollow offering was not meant to appease. It was meant to open, and he was the door. The wound in the sky throbbed like a living heart, each pulse tearing it wider. The black tear hung open, and the hands beyond it clawed against the edges, scraping at reality like nails on bone. The traveler's body was no longer his. Threads of crimson pierced his flesh, weaving his veins into ground, stitching him to the hollow. His chest burned with the keeper's needle, the wound refusing to close, bleeding not with blood, but with light. His scream was not his own. It echoed through the hollow, a chorus of countless voices stitched together. Every villager who had ever vanished, every soul consumed by the veil, cried through him. The keeper towered above, its threads snapping taut, its featureless head bowed in reverence. It whispered without sound. "The door is open. The hollow breathes. Step through and all will be unmade." The villagers pressed their hands to the pulsing soil, their eyeless sockets turned upward. Their silent chant swelled inside his skull. "Unveil him! Unveil him! Unveil him!" The Devourer writhed in fury below. Its countless mouths bellowed. Its storm of faces stretched toward the traveler, desperate to reclaim him. It tore at the threads, snapping them with teeth of shadow. But each break was healed again by the keeper's hand. And then the tear itself spoke, not with words, with hunger. Its silence crashed down like a tidal wave. Every thought, every memory, every fragment of identity was drowned in its pull. The traveler felt his body unraveling, his soul stretched thin, his existence reduced to a thread in the tapestry of the hollow. He saw himself becoming the door, flesh bending into archways, bones forming pillars, veins twisting into chains. Through him, the hands would enter. Through him, the world would end. But beneath the agony, beneath the pull of the tear, something stirred. A memory. It was small, insignificant, but it clung to him with the strength of a dying flame. The sound of a river at dusk, the laughter of children, the warmth of a fire on winter nights. His mother's voice, telling him once, long ago, "Beware the veil, child. It waits for you to forget who you are." And in that moment, He understood. The veil did not take by force. It took by erasure, by stripping memory, by hollowing identity, by making the living forget their own name. Only then could it claim them. He clenched his teeth. The threads tore deeper, but he resisted. He whispered his name aloud, though the hollow roared against it. I am not yours. The tear trembled. The villagers shrieked voiceless cries. The keeper staggered, its crimson threads thrashing wildly, piercing deeper into him in desperation. The Devourer surged upward, seizing its chance. It wrapped him in its storm of faces, clawing at the threads, pulling, ripping, consuming. For the first time, the black tear recoiled. The hands withdrew, clawing in fury as the wound narrowed. The silence cracked with thunder. The traveler screamed. The keeper screamed. The Devourer screamed. And all of it became one sound, a rupture that split the hollow apart. The ground convulsed. The crimson threads burned away. The villagers collapsed, their bodies dissolving into ash. And then silence. The traveler awoke, on the edge of a forest he did not recognize. The sky above was gray, the sun pale, the air heavy with the scent of iron. The veil was gone. The tear was gone. The Devourer was gone. But something lingered. His shadow stretched too far across the earth. It bent wrong. It moved when he did not. And when he touched his chest, he felt the needle still lodged within, its point forever pressing against his heart. The hollow had not released him. It had only marked him. And in the distance, beyond the trees, a faint shimmer of red mist swayed, waiting. The crimson veil had not ended. It never would. It simply waits for the next name to forget itself.